They know that they have to change. They know that they're under the gun. They know that. I mean, the whole country knows that. So I think it's not a fact of it ain't broke, so we don't have to fix it. It's broken.
But I suppose my point is that the system, whatever it might be, and whether we go back to an imperial militarist system, was still one that achieved great things. And yet, looking at the numbers, if we're talking about engagement and necessarily happiness, that arguably there are parts that are missing from those. If you look at the numbers for Latin America, and Brazil's, I think, number was higher than anywhere in Europe. So there we have people that are perfectly happy. But there are elements that are missing to make that convert into business success. So I suppose necessarily we can then conclude that happiness doesn't necessarily end up in business success.
No, we're not worrying about a happiness index
or engagement or what it might be
as a happiness index as a correlation with GDP, right?
Right.
But what I think we've got here, you think back. You've got a mobile phone, I suppose.
Yeah.
What are you using?
An iPhone.
iPhone. Why aren't you using iMode?
Why am I not?
Yeah.
Because of the range of functions that I can get with the iPhone.
But iMode was the most sophisticated mobile phone system in the world.
It was. It was for a short time.
It was for a short time. Well, it was for quite a while.
Yeah.
You know, and yet today, who's using iMode? Nobody.
Right.
Now our iPhones are full of Japanese parts, but you know it's basically an assembly model, but the design and the concepts are coming out of the brain, not out of the factory. You see, and so it's a good analogy, I guess, or a metaphor perhaps for Japan's problem. They need to have that design and have that innovative aspect because they can't sustain it just by iMode should have dominated the world, but it didn't. You know, so there are so many good things in Japan. As I said before, you've got a disciplined workforce. You've got a loyal, relatively speaking, workforce. You've got people who take their work seriously. They can be relied upon. You know, that's a terrific base. You don't get the variety of service levels you might get somewhere else. It's pretty consistent here. But that's just not enough anymore. They've got to be able to take it to another level. They've got to become more competitive. You've got an ageing population here, which has got a declining growth rate, which is forcing Japanese companies to now engage with other parts of the world by locating their businesses there or buying businesses there, because they have to balance the risk. They've got to take an assessment about the future, a shrinking market. They need growth markets. They've got to get out of Japan. So the future for Japan cannot be insular. It can't be a type of reverse dejima where the Japanese are all on dejima and the rest of the world is Japan, you know, the archipelago. It's actually, they've got to be global. And to be global requires another level of sophistication. So, I mean, there are so many things here. It's safer here than Brazil, you know. More reliable. You don't have the disparity of income there. You don't have concentration of wealth in a minuscule number of people. You don't have the racial tensions there. You don't have a whole raft of issues in that particular environment. But the potential of this country is still huge. Now, they might be number 3 and they might slip to number 4 at some point, who knows. It doesn't matter because ultimately it's a sophisticated culture. It's got tremendous technological capability. It's got a basic education system which is pretty good. It's got potential to do a lot more. I mean, if you could get this another 5 or 10% more creativity, that's all out of your teams across the board in this country. Wow, you know, things would be looking a lot brighter, I think. And I don't know that it's beyond Japan to do it, but it's just you've got to have a break from the old answers which are no longer working and get into what are the new answers. And certainly we're seeing that as a training company. You know, I never thought that I'd be asked to be training 50-year-olds, you know, senior leaders, because what they've found is that they're tapped out. You know, they are just not getting enough out of those people. And what the companies are realising is these 50-year-olds are going to be here till they're 70. So they're saying, well, I've got these guys for another 20 years because we don't have the ability to just replace them. We have to keep them going. But we want more out of these guys. Mainly they're guys. I say guys, they're mainly guys, right?
Right.
At this point in time. The idea of actually having some women in there is probably coming. But we'll get to that one, I guess, eventually in Japan and tap into that half of the population. But still, that's what they're thinking. So we are doing training. And again, I think the sort of that 50s, 60s bracket is also, I call them the sort of, lost patrol, because when they were younger, they came up, you had the burst of the bubble, and they were in their 30s in those days, and suddenly everything's really gone to the wall here. So marketing budgets get cut, training budgets get cut. Who knows, it's going to go into 3 decades, long. So you think it's going to last a couple of years, and so they don't spend the money for a couple of years. And then these guys don't get trained, and they move up a bit. And so then when the faucet gets turned back on for training monies, it goes to the younger people. So these guys sort of missed out. So you've got a sort of middle management generation who's now become senior management who just missed out. They never got the time and the chance to be challenged by new management ideas. And so they're really a blank there. And this is why we're doing a lot of training with these people. So we're bringing them back to information and concepts and ideas that they should have had probably 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
And so there's that element. But I also think managing the younger generation, they're more idiosyncratic, I think. They're more individual. They're more technology capable. They're better informed. They're more demanding. They're more me, so they're a challenge, When I worked for Shinsei Bank, we had older 50 years generation bank branch leaders, and we had these young grads coming out of universities, the good universities, inverted commas, and you could just see it was oil and water. The older guys, they really thought that tough love was still a viable management tool. Trust me, nobody in the younger generation has got any interest in tough love whatsoever.
Right.
And that's why, until about, what is it, maybe, I don't know, is it 10 years ago now? Maybe nearly 10 years ago now. We didn't have a word, Dai-ni Shinsotsu, the second generation of graduates from university, which means come out at 22, 23, depart your company, 4 or 5 years later, and go to another company. We'd never had that. That term itself did not exist. And so that reflects that young people are not putting up with it. They have got a long time frame.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, well, no, this boss is a jerk. This company's a jerk. I'm going to go somewhere where the grass is greener. Well, they might get to the other grass and find it's not particularly greener. And that's life, but they're leaving. They're costing companies a lot of money when they leave. They've got to be replaced. All the investment is walking straight out the door to somebody else. And so all the foreign companies, thank you very much, are hiring these people.
Right.
Because they've got the environment where they can use that type of talent. So it's expensive for Japanese companies to lose them. So, there are those sorts of issues around, again, middle management. You are the conduit here. You're the lightning rod here for the younger generation, the senior management of the company, getting the why message out there, getting people to be putting in their ideas through their discretionary effort, looking for innovation to get comparative advantage and differentiable advantage over your rivals, etc. Being the core group who will help the company to globalise the business and deal with the international entities which they've now bought or created. So they're a critical group, and yet it's still not being done fast enough, I think, to really capture that.
But you are seeing now the kind of realisation by the senior managers that actually it's time to change, it's time to engage these workers, it's time to do something.
We're seeing more of it. I don't think we're seeing enough of it, frankly. There's still a lot of inertia. here. It's not moving as fast as I think Japan needs it to move, quite frankly. But we see, probably for us, our critical focus is getting behaviour change. Now, the irony there is that most training doesn't work. Most training does not produce behaviour change. Most training, people come in, do the training, go out, and they go back to their workspace and go back to doing things exactly as they used to do it. They haven't absorbed the training into changing their behaviour pattern. What we focus on is changing that behaviour pattern, because the same things done in the same way, getting the same result is just not good enough. Companies want a better result. Now, a better result is going to require a change. It's either going to be we do something new or we do something old but in a different way. It doesn't matter whether it's either of those. Both represent something new. The problem with new there is it's something involving you stepping out of your comfort zone. And comfort zone is all about reduction of risk. We all find the fastest, cheapest, safest way to work every day. We stand in front of the door where the escalator is right there when the door opens, closest to the exit. We're creatures of habit. We get into our comfort zones. We eat within a half a kilometre radius of our office in the same restaurants all the time that we've tried and we know are good. We have the same group of friends that we're comfortable with, right? The problem is, if you stay in your comfort zone, you're not going to try something new. You're not going to engage with the change. So we have to get people to have the confidence to step out of their comfort zone and take on the new in terms of a new way of doing things or a new way of implementing the task. Once we get people to do that, that's where you get training which has outcomes, because they go back to just doing things in a new way and getting a different result, a better result. The trouble is, even though there's lots of training, most of it doesn't have that element in it. So that's a big gap still. So just, particularly in Japan, my God, Japanese style of corporate training is just horrendous. It's lecture. It's the sensei, the guru, lecturing, dry, boring, just data download. Everyone's sleeping. They're just dying in their seats, And so
text-heavy PowerPoints.
Oh, my God, yes.
Yeah.
And so what you get there is a nation of corporate warriors trained to be bored to death in the training process. So when you mention the word training to Japanese people, they have a couple of reactions. Their first reaction is, is there some veiled criticism of me in suggesting that I need training? Am I failing in my job? Am I not being properly praised here about how well I'm doing my task? Is there some hidden agenda to get rid of me? That's their first reaction. Wow. The second reaction is, oh my God, this is going to be droll, boring, dull. It's going to be, watching paint dry is going to be more exciting than this.
Right.
So you can imagine, we get them in the classrooms. There's a lot of what we call in the training business hostiles. They've got the arms folded, legs kicked out. Why am I here? I don't want to be here. This is unhelpful. This is not useful. Waste of my time. So we have to turn. We have been doing adult education for a long time. We've been in Japan for more than 50 years, so we know how to turn that around. But my God, it's pretty confronting when you see it. Trust me.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a product of middle management, because what happens is, this is the conversation. Nick, training's on in 2 weeks. CHR, they've got the details. That's it. So poor old Nick's going, what's happening?
Right.
Why? What's wrong? As opposed to, Nick, you're doing a really good job, Nick. We've seen you doing a good job. We recognise that you have got a career here at the top, and we're going to help you to get there. We're going to invest in you. We're going to give you the tools to become even better than you are today. We're bringing in the world-famous Dale Carnegie organisation who runs some training, and you have been one of the few people selected to take part in that. Now, I'm sure there are many areas you'd like to get the maximum benefit in the training from. What are some things you'd like to work on yourself? Oh, yeah, that's good. Yes, I see all that. That's great. And by the way, looking from my point of view as your boss, I see a couple of areas here where I think if we worked on these as well, you'd be even better. So let's add those to the list. We'll send this to the trainer. So during the training, they will be trying to help you in these particular areas to be even better than you are today. And by the way, when you come back from training, I want you to tell me how you're going to execute in your job what you've learned. Imagine that conversation compared to Nick, training's on in 2 weeks. CHR for details.
Be there.
So you can imagine if you had that type of middle management setting up of the training, and then you have the debriefing of the training at the end. Wow, what sort of difference is that? You know? And I think that's the missing piece in Japan when you talk about training, because there is a lot of training, but there's not a lot of good training. There's not a lot of training that gets behaviour change. And we know ourselves. It takes 250 hours of training for us to certify a Dale Carnegie trainer. That's a lot of training. It takes about a year and a half. You've got to be really committed.
Right.
The reason is because we are getting behaviour change. We know how difficult that is to get that behaviour change. And the courses where we really get the behaviour change are very nuanced, like they're 100 years old. And you've got this Kaizen idea over 100 years of constant refinement to really understand in adult learners how to get that behaviour change. So we know this is not a simplistic thing. It's so difficult to get. But unless you're getting that, the training does not have any residual effect. And you'll find it yourself. You go and ask people a month after they've had training, what do they remember? And I tell you, the first thing is they're looking at the ceiling, you know, stroking their chin pensively, thinking, yeah, what did I learn? They can't remember because it's gone in one ear and out the other. Because the methodology of instruction was lecture, it was boring, it was just dull, you know, there wasn't the experiential part, there wasn't the self-discovery part, you know, there wasn't the role modelling part, there wasn't the ability to put it into practice immediately to really cement it. All that's missing. So, you know, as a training company, that's where we really try to put the effort, because we know that gets permanent learning. Well, that's what we're going for, behaviour change with permanent learning. So it's not easy to do that. But if you do that, then the benefit is that the training has high value.
In terms of, I suppose, the motivation for Japanese workers, I want to read to you something that I read from another consultant, where they were looking at motivators vis-a-vis money and how much that plays a role and other motivations. This is Pernille Rudlin of a company called Japan Intercultural Consulting. She said, all people, regardless of nationality, want to feel recognised for making a positive difference in the world through their work. For many Japanese, the traditional way to do this has been through becoming a long-time respected member of a major company. For many Westerners, this route does not exist. So impact on society has to be more visibly rewarded through pay or status. And this was part to do with the argument about very senior management being, particularly in Japan, but other places, being paid more, substantially more than Japanese senior managers. What are your thoughts, though, on that idea?
I think people do want to feel appreciated. They do want to feel recognised for their work. We know that pay alone is not necessarily a big enough motivator. There are certain transactional businesses, traders, etc., where, yes, they don't have to interact with others. They're sole agents almost. At the end of the day, you close the business, you've made money, you've lost money. It's all very, very cut and dried. But that's a very, very, very tiny microcosm of you know, the finance business, and that's a very small portion of any population. For the vast majority of people, it's really, am I sensing and feeling that I'm valued? That's a critical thing. So how do you feel that? And this is, again, it's coming out of your management, it's coming out of your leadership, and how do they communicate that to you? And it's a bit like, if you're married like me and you love your wife, you've got to remember, you've got to tell her. You know, of course she knows it, but actually she wants to hear it, you know. So it's the same problem, that bosses do appreciate their workers, but they've got to remember to tell them that. And again, this is training. This is pure and simple, getting people to have that awareness that you need to communicate more. And so I don't think these are difficult things to do, but it's, if the training isn't there and the awareness is not there, you tend to default to your normal routine, which is assumption that somehow, without communicating it, everyone knows I really care. And without telling anybody that I'm really got their interests at my best, their best interests at heart. that's not the case. You've got to tell them, you've got to communicate, you've got to be constantly getting them involved. So I think the number differentiation between senior leadership in Japan, what they get paid and what they get paid in the West, is just purely a function of the profitability of companies and the individual component in that profitability, where in Japan, because it's more of a group consensus society and a group effort, it's hard to pinpoint an individual who's actually been the key person to get that big outcome. And so it's all sort of sacrifice for the group rather than put yourself forward as the individual, right? And so, I mean, you had that case where the guy actually came up with a particular innovation. It was painted by the company, and he just got paid, peanuts.
Oh yeah, the LED.
Yeah, for the innovation, and then he sued them eventually, right?
Yeah.
Now, that's just a cultural thing, that you work for the company and yes, of course you innovate, and you'll get paid a lot later when you get to the top. But if you don't get to the top, you don't get paid a lot later, right? So that's how it is. Whereas in Western countries, there's more at risk. Your job is at risk. You've got big bonus, big salary, but you may be out of a job too. Whereas Japan, that's not likely to happen unless you really do something pretty flagrant. So, it's a sort of mediocre, sort of middle-of-the-road type of idea, as opposed to a high-achieving, all-in, all-out, high-risk, high-return type of environment. So I think that sort of differentiates the payment side. And again, money's important, but people are looking for more than that.
But do you think those are greater drivers of motivation in the West, as in money and status, position in the company, than maybe they are in Japan?
To a degree, yes, but it's not that dissimilar in that, again, people want to be recognised. They want the money, yes, but they want to have the sense of achievement in their work. They want to have the sense that they're well regarded, bosses recognise them, and are obviously recognised because they've been told. They want all of that, So I think probably the money's probably a bit better, but the risk is higher. But they still want the same things, even though it's not just money. Anyone who thinks money is the only motivator is talking about a very, very tiny, small group of usually extremely well-remunerated people.
Right.
Now, if you want to pay your people truckloads of money, go for it. But most companies don't want to do that. They want to pay people a fair wage, fair remuneration for a fair day's work. They can't afford to pay people, voluminous amounts of money. They can only afford to pay a few people out who are bringing in huge amounts of money usually. So it's it goes in step. For the vast majority of people, 99% of people, that's not even an issue.
Right. I suddenly ran a blank there. Where was I going? I was almost down. Oh, that's right. Taking another, I suppose, element of the idea of what you were talking about before, which was about innovating and getting Japan to move ahead with new ideas and being able to, I suppose, take that leap into, I suppose, what might be argued the next generation of the economy. There have been some interesting moves in this area, namely with Rakuten and to a lesser degree with Uniqlo. Rakuten in particular because it's now moved to an all-English environment. And Mikitani has said that one of the motivating reasons for this was because he said he didn't want the language, in this degree Japanese, to restrict the way that people thought. And he thought that English would enable people to think freer. Do you agree with that concept? And would you support that kind of move to creating what you were talking about, the end goal of more innovative, thought-provoking environments?
Well, Mikitani's success with Rakuten is substantial, but if you go back to when he started, it was all hard slog, and there was no its own English policy then. And so that's something that's evolved as they've had the success. And he's quite smart in thinking global from the very beginning. And he got to a certain size where he could then implement a policy like that. and they are doing things globally. He's seeing the world globally, and so he needs a population of people who are global thinkers and who are able to access information globally, as opposed to what's just coming through a thin filter of translation into Japanese. So I think there probably is some greater freedom when you're in a foreign language. I think Japanese language is rather circuitous compared to English, which is tending to be a bit more direct. There's probably a lot more subtlety in Japanese language and nuance than perhaps there is in English. So it does probably tend to restrict you a little bit. But I think that it's probably great if you can have people being multilingual or bilingual in a company where it's a global business. I think it's great that even people who are in domestic businesses would have that ability to tap into what is an incredible amount of information availability these days over the internet, just vast. I think that's all positive too. I think the ability to think, though, is not restricted by language. The ability to innovate is not restricted by language. I mean, when we do our own 9-step innovation process training, Japanese come up with great ideas because they're given two things. They're given a tool that allows them to plumb the depths of their own creativity and thinking. And secondly, they're given the freedom to come up with ideas without critique in the first instance. So we have what we call green light, red light thinking. And, De Bono had his 6 thinking hats, and there are numerous ways of looking at this. But it's a similar idea that anybody who's going to have criticism and critique of an idea at the idea generation stage is just put the sword to the idea generation process completely. What you've got to have is freedom to put up your wacky, off-the-wall, bizarre, pointless, hopeless, ridiculous idea. You've got to have the freedom to do that because your wacky, hopeless, ridiculous, crazy idea may be the spark of stimulation for somebody else to come up with something that may be more viable. But if you didn't have that spark, that may not be triggered. So you need to have that freedom, and this is where I think the Japanese system is not particularly good from a managerial point of view to allow that freedom. And so, give me your best ideas, perfectly formulated off the bat, is not a great approach, because the idea generation process, innovation process is messy. It's incredibly irregular. It's something that doesn't go in a direct line. It's all over the shop. That's how it works. So you can't try and formalize that into some sort of linear pattern, which is what I think a lot of Japanese companies and their middle management are trying to do. So I think you give people the right tool and the right freedom and environment, encouragement, and you will get that. And I've seen that. I've done, the last 20 years of running businesses in Japan, I've always done brainstorming, always done idea creation, and I can tell you, in my experience, the Japanese are no less creative than anybody else. Right. It's just a matter of tapping into the reservoir there of ideas that they've got, which they are not usually encouraged to bring out. And you give them the opening, and the floodwaters open up, if I use my reservoir example, and out they come. They're there. And great ideas, brilliant ideas, so it's there.
So looking at the experience you've had in Japan to date, and certainly you said some of the baby steps you're seeing with maybe middle management, plus maybe some of the realisation in the government even, in particular when I think about the Education Ministry, which is pointed the finger at the universities and said, we now need global graduates, globalised graduates, and has pointed out 30 particular universities, which they were now willing to stump up the cash to support. Are you optimistic?
I'm shaking my head off mic here because that's a think about it. They had the Yutori Kyoiku, right, the relaxed education, to take out the number of hours of rote learning and introduce some element of more creative, innovative thinking, right? It lasted, about 8-9 years? And because they dropped in the international comparative tables around country positioning and status, they all panicked. Now, rote learning is great when you're in kindergarten and when you're in primary school, maybe when you're in high school. But, this isn't going to cut it in the real world of business. And so what you've got is a tremendous rote learning platform up to the end of high school. And then you go into university. What happens in university? Well, first of all, the first problem is no one does any study at university of any great consequence or significance. I mean, I graduated from Japanese university, I know. The things that I would have expected were going on there weren't going on there. The rigour of debate that should have been going on there wasn't going on there. The style of lecturing was very one way. It was very, top down. It was very droll. And so they're not really being challenged at university. So this sort of, we're going to make you global and throw money at it. Well, that's fine, go for it. But your real problem is not that. Your real problem is to change the way that people think about problem solving and to get more ideas out and more debate going and more communication going at the tertiary level, because it is not there. I mean, the quality of experience that I had at an Australian university coming through the tutorial system and having to defend a position and promote an idea or an interpretation of something or other, phenomenal. Japanese don't get that. They just don't get that. So, you go to sleep for 4 years and have club activities and socialisation and, drink beer and chase girls or whatever they do, the guys at least anyway. And you come out of it a little bit older but not much smarter.
But do you think the recognition by the government at least is a step now, that they are at this crossroads, that they are now looking, even before the corporate level, that we do need to make changes here for it to follow through into our companies? Well,
there's certainly, I suppose I'm always a bit leery about government solutions from the Ministry of Education, in Japan. I mean, my dealings with them don't give me a great deal of optimism about their ability to direct anything, frankly. Depressing place to visit too. I've got to tell you, if you've ever had the opportunity to visit there. But I think, yes, there may be a recognition, but whether there's the actual wherewithal and the smarts to actually make a difference, I have my doubts, quite frankly. I have my doubts. I'm not confident.
Lastly then, how do you expect these figures right now to continue? When we looked at the engagement of workers in Japan, how do you foresee those continuing?
I think it'll stay like it is. I don't see any major rebound in a hurry. It's like everything. There's a certain momentum gets to a point of what's the word I'm struggling for here? Of critical mass is the word I'm struggling for. I'm losing my English after living here all these years. A critical mass where change has to come, and I think not too many economies can have like 3 decades of downturn and decade upon decade of deflation, and still bounce back. But Japan's, I think, is coming out of it. I think we're finally making the turn around the corner somewhere, slowly but surely. But it needs to speed up and it needs to go broader and deeper and faster, of course. So I'd really like to encourage Japanese companies to really rethink what they're doing and how they're doing it, and particularly look at their middle management. I mean, if I had one answer for them, I'd say go back and have a look at your middle managers. You might have to write off your seniors. They're beyond the pale.
Right.
No tricks for those old dogs, But at least for your middle managers, inject something into them that's going to have an on-the-job training in the future that's best practice, as opposed to worst practice, and isolate those guys and gals out to be, and I say gals there because I want some gals in there too, to be represented in the same numbers, so that you've got a more diverse workforce, you've got a more capable group who can direct the people below and can feed up important ideas and innovations to the top and be that glue that holds the whole thing together, but also be the engine that drives it forward. So I think the opportunity is there. But you've got, it's like the calcification of the spine type of problem here. It's sclerotic right through that management area in Japan. So it's got a long way to go. And until that happens, you're not going to get those engagement scores going anywhere. And that means you're not going to be getting the discretionary effort, you're not going to be getting the innovation, and you're not going to be competitive. You're just going to see a slow burn as we slide, ever so gently downhill into the sludge, the toxic sludge at the bottom, if we're not careful, So let's not do that. Let's reverse gear and drive on up the hill, get away from that.
Greg, thank you very much indeed.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for joining the Leadership Japan podcast. If you would like to access more great insights and information, then go to japan.dalecarnegie.com.